Well, hello everybody. Good evening. Welcome to our Mexican Crossing Lines. We're on our 11th episode of Psyop BS. So tune in, turn on, and turn off, or whatever it goes. You can find us on YouTube at Duke1517, on Facebook at 88.1 Fargo Moorhead Radio, and on Twitch at A Mexican Crossing Lines.
On YouTube at Duke1517.
That's correct.
On Instagram at Gomez-Schempp. Is it?
Something like that. At media_PPP on Twitter.
That's right.
Oh, forgot to tell you. We have our call-in line. Leave a message at 701-566-0917. Again, that's 701-566-0917. Leave a message. We'll get back to you as soon as we can.
Yeah, you can leave about a 3-minute message. I do follow up on those and check them. So if you have a tip, if you want to share your story, if you want to do an interview with our station, all of that can be arranged. And today, I'm going to be bringing you Psyop BS Part 11. Now, one of the things that is important for me to acknowledge is that there are people out there that are watching our show that have been watching our shows for years and that have been providing us information about what we're talking about and how it relates to the past.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Because
there were so many frauds and predators and, mercenary influencers that were at Standing Rock.
Definitely, yep.
That hurt people in our communities, in the local area here in the Midwest where we live. And besides what happened at Standing Rock, there have been repercussions to people and their families all over the country and all over the world.
Yep, exactly. And there's still a lot of these fake activists that are still cashing in. You know, they're still bringing up the cred, reinventing themselves with the street cred from Standing Rock, and they're trying to make bank.
Oh, they still are.
Yeah.
I just saw today a poster for an upcoming movie that Phyllis Young and Chase Iron Eyes are on the cover of called
really?
Oyate, coming out in April 2020. Oh, yes, the grift goes on and on and on. It's the grift that keeps on giving. And these folks are going to continue to cash in. That was the reason why they got involved. That's why they were chosen by the PR people that went to Standing Rock along with Wes Clark. And they were picked because of the different roles that they play in this, cult-like, shamanistic, religious-like movement that Sean Stone and Wes Clark and James Martinez and all of these people became a part of, which eventually turned into QAnon and eventually carried out a coup on American soil in modern times. That's what we're dealing with. These are the people that are anti-vax. These are the people that are anti-trans. These are the people that are Nazi adjacent, fascist, white supremacist adjacent. And a lot of them were born in the crucible of the spectacle that was Standing Rock, including Wes Clark Jr.
Yep.
Now, the last show, we left off with the connections between Sean Stone, Wes Clark Jr., and these culty, fake shaman connections between these individuals. And I shared with you that Sean Stone doesn't just have a show called Watching the Hawks on Russian television, but that he interviewed a whole slew of people to include Wes Clark Jr., to include Honor the Earth's leader, Winona LaDuke, and also Chase Iron Eyes. And I also told you that on this, watching the Hawks Russian television program, they had a whole program about metahumans. And they had all of these shaman and all of these folks that are spiritual, that are leading some kind of spiritual or are part of some spiritual movement. And that it was promoted by right-wing media, including the show, which I think is called Midnight Caravan, now a defunct radio show that was, the host of the show was John B. Wells, a right-wing conservative that was a fundraiser for General Flynn.
Oh, yeah.
And they had promoted a lot of different groups of people that were in this spiritual realm, like the Unify group. And this Unify group had a whole bunch of different thought leaders and group, affiliations to these shaman-like people.
Oh, yeah.
We have an image for that, I believe, that we showed you of the Unify group, which included Phil Lane Sr. or Phil Lane Jr. I'm not sure which one he is. That they're pictured. There's in the pictures here that are circled. We see Phil Lane among the group. Chief Phil Lane, it says. But we also have Tulsi Gabbard. And there's also Tim. Is that Tim Robbins? Is that what his name is?
Oh, yeah. The motivational.
Motivational speaker.
Yeah.
And then you've got this other guy, the British guy. I can't remember his name right now. But you have so many different gurus and spiritual healers and motivational speakers and these these kinds of spiritual influencers. You know why Tulsi Gabbard's there?
Why?
She's part of a cult too.
Oh, really?
Her dad is part of a cult
Oh, that's
she
right.
was part that she joined.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a Hare Krishna type of a cult.
Yeah.
And Tulsi Gabbard's cult is run by a white surfer dude named Chris Butler, I think his name is. It's really, really weird. I'll have to get into that some other time. It's an interesting story.
Sounds like it.
That you should know about. But what I want you to know is that Wes Clark Jr. and the people in the PR team that works with Trevor Fitzgibbons and Winnie Wong and Desiree Kane and Seven McDonald and the folks that were doing PR for Julian Assange.
Okay, yeah.
And Chelsea Manning. And all of those folks, they were involved in doing promotion at Standing Rock. And the folks that they were with included actors and actresses from Hollywood.
Yeah.
Like Jane Fonda and Frances Fisher.
Yeah.
And Margot Kidder from Superman.
Yep.
And the Arquette sisters. And
all
all sorts
Ruffalo,
of... And
the Hulk,
Mark Ruffalo. All sorts of B-list, C-list actors that I've shared with you. Like Kendrick Sampson.
Yeah.
And the two brothers, the two twin brothers that we saw, Max Carver and his brother. But those people were promoting folks that are considered to be influencers within leaders within the indigenous movements, but that happen to be well-known frauds.
Yep.
Fake shaman, as I showed you in my last show. And one of the people that they were promoting isn't just a fake shaman.
Mm-hmm.
They were promoting a person that is a drug trafficker. Susie Desba,
Yeah.
or Vanessa Dundon, as she is named in her government papers, we showed you recently, was arrested and charged for trafficking methamphetamines and cocaine on the Hopi and Navajo reservations. And here is a picture of one of the people that she, or some of the people that she was hanging out with. Kenny Frost is in this photo on the end, and next to him is a guy named Eddie Blackcloud. So we know that folks like Francis Fisher were promoting all of these different leaders, and so were folks like Vanessa that were very prominent in the movement, which people like Francis Fisher were constantly telling you to donate to and support, right? And they were also connected very closely to other leaders like Dennis Banks. Francis Fisher is also connected very closely to Dennis Bank, and Eddie Blackcloud was also featured alongside Mr. Dennis Banks.
Wow.
This is prior to his passing, which happened more recently.
Yeah.
Then you have the history that I shared with you about Eddie Blackcloud in my last show, that he is accused, that he is alleged to have committed a lot of predatory crimes against women, domestic violence, abuse, and having relations with underage women.
Oh, boy.
Okay? We shared that with you. I want to show you that as recently as August of 2019, there were still warrants out for Mr. Blackcloud. And I shared with you posts that talked about these warrants that were outstanding for him that you could find out more about from the tribal courts. And in this YouTube video, you see that they're commenting about the video I'm going to share with you in just a moment, where you're going to hear someone calling into the tribal court to check on those warrants. And it says about this video that you're about to hear that it was posted with a warrant list from September of 2018. And that the last public postings of the warrant list that were made public was on February 15 of 2019.
Okay.
At the time that this audio was posted, it was August of 2019, and Eddie Blackcloud was still at large with warrants outstanding for his arrest. But somehow the man is still posting on social media, is still loose and out in the world, free to harm other folks and free to continue his fraudulent and dangerous behaviors. Take a listen to the call-in to the tribal court asking about Eddie Blackcloud's warrants. Here you go.
Tribal court, can I help you?
Yes, ma'am. I'm trying to verify some warrants.
No, I mean, what's the person's name? I can give you, tell you if they're on our warrant list.
Yes, it's Edward Peter Blackcloud Sr. The reference number...
Wait, now hold on. You said Edward Blackcloud?
Yes.
Yeah, that person is on our warrant list.
Okay. Now, are those tribal warrants? Is that a bench warrant?
Yeah, they would be, I don't know if it's civil or criminal or...
Okay, that's what we're actually interested in. Are they just tribal warrants? Are they bench warrants?
No. The same thing.
Okay, so that
it's
is
for,
something
it's a warrant from a criminal case from 2016.
Basically, we're just trying to verify that the warrants are still open and active and pursuable.
Okay, the only warrant I see open for Edward P. Blackcloud, date of birth 10/2/68. Is that the same person you're referencing?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. The only thing I have on a warrant open on for him is on a, let's see here. It looks like it is a warrant from 2016.
Correct.
And it's still currently active.
Correct. Now, the information that we were given was he had warrants for simple assault, destruction of property, assault on a minor, any of that, assault with a deadly weapon. I don't know if any of that is correct.
See that? You would have to talk to the prosecutor's office. I don't have that information. And on the ones that I have right now, for this case that I just gave you, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 charges listed on there, and it's disorderly conduct, simple assault, aggravated assault, and criminal mischief. And they're all dated. The occurrence date is 12/4/2016. So that case currently sitting on a bench warrant.
There you go. So there is bench warrants, or there were bench warrants that were for this individual as recently as 2019. There are other warrants that are open for him. Apparently, this guy has been arrested multiple times.
Wow.
In fact, people in his family have stated that he has been in jail most of his life.
Wow.
That he has spent most of his life in jail. So, like I said, I've been contacted by a whole list of people that have told me that, yes, he has warrants out for his arrest. He's been arrested in other places. And, in fact, while I'm sitting here right now, I was just sent another message about the time that he was in Pennsylvania and the damage that he did to women in that region. I heard that he was recently arrested in Georgia.
Really?
But this guy, like I said, has been in and out of prison most of his life. So, I wanted to share with you from his own words a letter to the editor that he wrote.
Oh, really?
Back in 2011 to Lakota Times.
Oh.
Now, he wrote this letter because he wanted to get attention. He was trying to get the attention of people that defend Native rights,
Okay.
that hate to see discrimination against Indigenous people, and that are, seeking to do justice for Indigenous people. So he wrote a letter to the editor because he was trying to get attention from the Lakota Times and its readers for what he claimed was his victimhood in the penitentiary system. He said that he was enrolled as a member of the Lakota Nation and currently incarcerated in South Dakota State Penitentiary, and said that prior to his conviction in sentencing and transfer to the facility where he is now, he had been held for an extensive length of time in Pennington County Jail in Rapid City, South Dakota. And while he was there, he was the constant target of harassment, racial discrimination, along with mental and verbal abuse. And as is often the case with Native people in the state of South Dakota, his cries went unheard, and as a result, he is currently, or at the time, he was currently in a lawsuit against the jail, its administration, and its health providers because he felt that they had not only mistreated him, discriminated against him on the basis of race, but that they were deliberately indifferent to his medical conditions, and they did not provide him adequate medical care, medication, and that he was tortured, essentially. Cruel and unusual punishment at the hands of the people in the jail system. He also exposed in this that he has a long history of abuse. And in this paragraph where he talks about his medical history, he said, and this part I think is really important because of what I'm going to show you about this man. He said that he has a variety of physical and mental issues that he has been battling with, and that he gets help with medication and therapy. Okay? That it says right there, he gets medication and therapy for them. He said he has been diagnosed as bipolar, that he has been diagnosed as having mild psychosis, schizophrenia, and clinical depression.
Wow.
Okay? Those are all clinical diagnoses. Okay? So he goes on to plead with the audience of the Lakota Times to support him, to help him in his current plight in this lawsuit that he is in, because he can't seem to get anyone to help him, and that the authorities for the state, they disregard people with red skin, that are indigenous. They simply do not care about them. They're trying to silence him, and so he needs help from other Lakota people, from other indigenous people, and from people that want to help him. And so, you know what I did? I looked up this case. I thought, I'm going to go and check out this case that he is referring to, Black Cloud versus McClure et al., to find out more about his lawsuit, to see what the basis of it was, and if he was abused, and to what degree he was abused by the system. And what I found was very interesting. Here is Black Cloud versus McClure. And as you can see, there was a request for a motion for summary judgment, which means that the defendants in the case, who are the people that run the jail and the medical system in the jail that Eddie Black Cloud was suing, they requested for the judge to make a preemptive decision. Before they went to trial, they said, we've already submitted enough information that you can go ahead and make a decision without going to trial, and we should win based on the information we have provided you. And this is a motion for summary judgment that was granted. It says order granting motion for summary judgment. That means that the judge sided with the defendants against Eddie Black Cloud.
Wow.
He decided that Eddie Black Cloud did not have a good case. Okay? So there is a whole list of people that are listed as those who are in trouble, or those who are sued by Eddie Black Cloud. But the next slide is going to show you a little bit more about the meat of his complaint. Okay? Mr. Black Cloud, it says, was incarcerated at the Pennington County Jail from June of 2010 to December of 2010 for the possession and sale of drugs and narcotics.
Oh, boy.
So he is a convicted drug trafficker. Okay?
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that we understand that this is in 2010, but it's going to talk about, what we're going to see in here is that he was already in jail before for drugs and narcotics, for the same kinds of things, or for other reasons on top of that, but he's already been in jail before that. So I want you to I want to share with you in this next image from this court docket that it says here at the bottom in the footnote that Black Cloud provided copies of medical requests that he had submitted from 2006 to 2000 and in 2007. So that is years prior to this lawsuit. You see that? And it says in the footnote that not only did Black Cloud fail to allege in his amended complaint that the defendants violated his constitutional rights back in November of 2006 and February of 2007, but such actions would be barred from application to this case because of the statute of limitations.
Okay.
So I want to show you that he was also incarcerated back in 2006 and 2007 and tried to allege in this document here that back then his rights had been violated and that he, could you go back to the image we were on?
Yeah.
And that he was saying that the court told him, you know, there's a statute of limitations and you failed it.
Okay.
But the other important thing about this image is that Eddie Black Cloud in June 17th of 2010, said that he wanted to get a medical review done. He wanted to see a doctor because he needed prescriptions for asthma and for Wellbutrin. Okay? And this is in 2010. Make note of that.
Okay.
So he asked for a specific medication, Wellbutrin, and he said, I need to fill my prescriptions. That means I already have a diagnosis for asthma. I already have a diagnosis for whatever medical conditions require Wellbutrin, right? And I need to fill those scripts.
Yep.
Okay?
Exactly.
Okay. And in this next slide, you're going to see that this footnote tells us the whole history of his previous claims that he was mistreated by the healthcare system in the jails, and that because Black Cloud had filed his original complaint in December of 2010, that the claims related to events that occurred in jail in 2006 to 2007 were all barred from being applied to this particular claim. So they basically threw out all of his complaints about when he was incarcerated before and was denied medical treatment.
Okay.
Now, in this next slide, you're going to see that Black Cloud submitted a grievance stating that even though he was supposed to, by federal law, by a federal court, that he was ordered to be on psych medications for his psychiatric conditions, that they were denying him treatment for those medications and that he wanted immediately for that to be fixed. So he filed a grievance against the institution he was jailed at. And on August 31st, a nurse, Nurse McClure, told Mr. Black Cloud that she went through the whole of San Sue records, the Sioux San records, the medical facility, and they weren't able to find any psychiatric medications listed under his name, going all the way back to 2009.
Okay.
So they looked, could not find any psychiatric medications on his list of scripts that he is supposed to be able to refill. So she then asked Mr. Black Cloud, is there any other places where you filled your prescriptions? Any other pharmacy? Any other medical facility I should be checking to find these medical diagnoses and medications? And there was no other places that she was told to go check. Then later on, In September of 2010, Mr. Black Cloud again submitted an inmate grievance, claiming that he was being denied medical treatment.
Okay.
That for months he had been waiting, and that he went to the psych department at Sioux San Medical Facility, and that he still didn't have his medications that he needed. The nurse then responded in September and said that she had checked with Black Cloud's prescriptions, but that the pharmacy at Sioux San had no prescriptions on file for him. Then Miss McClure also informed Black Cloud that he had been put on a waiting list for an appointment at the medical clinic. So they said, we're going to get you in to see a doctor. We're going to get you treated. So they heard his request, and they tried to fulfill his appointment. The next time that we see a mention here, we see that Black Cloud submitted a request on October of 2010, twice, saying he needed to see a psychiatric doctor. And they met with him, and they referred him for treatment, and he received a prescription in November of 2010 for Wellbutrin to treat his depression and mood disorder. He finally gets a prescription for the medication he requested by name. Okay?
Okay.
So he gets his prescription for Wellbutrin, and when he finally gets the treatment, the diagnosis, and the prescription he was seeking without having the diagnosis or a prescription for those things before, what happens next? Is Eddie Black Cloud now happy? Is he satisfied that he's been given the medical care, the prescription that he wanted? No, he is not. He is upset because he wants his drugs the way he wants his drugs. And that is without interference from the medical facility. And so, can you give me Eddie Black Cloud drug seeking?
And the first
Drug seeking in jail. It's right there. I see it. I'm looking at it. Eddie, yes, that's the one. That's the correct one.
Okay.
So that's the same one about him requesting that he wanted this prescription, but he had no prescription on file for Wellbutrin. So then he gets his prescription, and the next thing that happens is he complains about the pills being crushed. His pills and everyone else's pills in jail are crushed. And the reason for that, Duke, is
what?
I looked this up, and they people in jail apparently abuse drugs. There's contraband when people are in jail or in federal prison, and people trade their medications if they have some kind of effect on folks when you take them all at once or whatever. You can sell them, or you can use them to trade for cigarettes or other drugs that you want, or favors, You pay people with these drugs. So these facilities have a rule to make it less easy for people to palm or cheek their drugs.
Okay, I get it. Yeah, that's why they crush them. Okay.
And it's called crush and float. Let me show you. This is from a rule book that is published online for correctional facilities, and it says, in light of concerns regarding misuse in correctional facilities, medications are often ordered by either prescribers or by institutional policy to be crushed by the nurse and to be administered in liquid.
Okay.
They call it crush and float. This minimizes the risk of cheeking or palming the medication by the inmates for later use or diversion.
Yeah.
Crushing tablets is always time-consuming for nursing staff, and it causes risks in adverse reactions and poses dangers to the facility and to the nurses, and they could even be contraindicated by the manufacturers. So this is a big problem for facilities and nurses and hospitals and clinics, but it's something that they have to do to avoid the inmates taking the drugs and amassing them for illicit use purposes or selling them.
I get it.
Or trading them.
Yeah.
Okay? So now that you have this knowledge, let me show you what Eddie Black Cloud did once he got his prescription for Wellbutrin. The next thing he did was to complain about them crushing his pills over and over again because he submitted a grievance contending his medications were wrongfully crushed up and not given to him in the original pill form as required by the law.
Oh, yeah.
And they told him, meds are crushed even in federal facilities, dude. This is a standard operating procedure. You can't have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
And then he submitted another request, another grievance about his medications being wrongfully crushed. Whoops, you got ahead of me there.
Oops, sorry.
We're still on the complaints about the crushed medications.
Gotcha.
And in this second grievance, he also added that they crushed his pills up in a dirty cup.
Oh.
And that these actions were never taken at a federal prison. He's been in federal prison, and they never did that there. And also that another grievance that he filed, he said that his psych medications were crushed together with a bunch of other people's medications, so he was getting a cocktail of crushed up psych medications, and that it was again put in a cup without cleaning. A dirty cup. And mixing narcotics is a violation of federal laws.
Oh, yeah.
Because, of course, this convicted drug trafficking felon is very concerned with cleanliness and very concerned with following federal laws.
That's right.
About narcotics, right? Or so he would have you believe. So he goes on and on and on complaining about this. Why would he be complaining about his Wellbutrin being crushed up? Well, as it happens, Wellbutrin is one of the drugs people abuse in jail.
Oh, okay.
Out in the normal world, most people just take their
just
medication for anxiety and depression and, call it a day. But in jail, these are highly sought after contraband drugs.
Okay.
Here I found from the Googles, it told me that Wellbutrin is abused in jail because while bupropion does not hold much attraction as a drug of abuse in the free world, it is one of the most commonly abused medications in jails and prisons. Inmates stockpile these doses to take several of them at once, sometimes crushing up the pills and even snorting them to obtain an amphetamine-like high.
I see.
And it is rumored by many of the people that I have spoken to who either witnessed themselves that Mr. Eddie Black Cloud was drunk and or high on drugs.
Yeah.
But we know he's a convicted drug felon. We've seen in the record of this case, he is drug seeking without a prescription and without a diagnosis. So prior to him getting the Wellbutrin that we know is sold and traded as contraband frequently in jails and prisons, he was drug seeking. And then when he got his drugs, he was complaining about the way that his drugs were given to him.
Okay.
But there's more in this one court case that tells us a lot about Eddie Black Cloud. Here is another part of the complaint in which he was put in solitary confinement, a.k.a. administrative segregation, also known as ADSAG. And while he was in ADSAG, he was complaining, saying that he was put there under false pretense and blah, 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 and in retaliation for complaining about his drugs being crushed, blah, blah, blah. And so they wrote a letter to explain to him why he was in ADSAG. And the reasons were because he assaulted someone in custody.
Oh, really?
And Black Cloud was going to further injure that person, or threaten to, while he was not in ADSAG. So he said, if you don't throw me in the shoe, I'm going to beat the pulp out of this dude that I already assaulted. So that's one of the reasons why they put him in ADSAG.
Wow.
Second reason why they put him in ADSAG says because Black Cloud was involved in the assault of another inmate.
Okay.
So he assaulted one inmate and threatened to keep on assaulting that inmate until he was put in ADSAG. And he assaulted another inmate. And then, on top of that, officials received reports that Black Cloud had been making unwanted sexual, racial, and vulgar comments toward other inmates.
Wow.
Ew. And finally, Black Cloud was hindering a search of his cell for contraband.
Okay. Yeah.
And he threatened the officer with two choices: leave his contraband in his room, in his cell, or put it in his property. So this guy, while he was in prison, where apparently he spent lots of time both in the federal system and in the jail system, he was drug seeking, he was assaulting people, he was being racist, and he is a convicted drug felon. But on top of that, Mr. Black Cloud failed in his lawsuit to prove any of the allegations he made toward the jail or the medical staff, which is that they tortured him, they denied him medical care, and they were discriminatory toward him. Here is the decision from the judge. It says Mr. Black Cloud failed to submit any evidence demonstrating that he'd been diagnosed by a physician with any serious medical conditions that required any type of treatment, and that he was a prisoner, that prisoners bear assertions of self-diagnosis, that their own assessment of themselves, which is not a doctor's assessment,
That's right.
are insufficient to establish the existence of a serious medical need. So just him saying, I have schizophrenia, I have this, that's not enough.
It's not
you have to have
conclusive,
a diagnosis, yes.
Yep.
And although Mr. Black Cloud alleges that he'd been prescribed certain medications, Nurse McClure received his records and discovered his prescriptions expired in 2009.
Okay.
So he did not have any current prescriptions for any of the things he claimed that he needed medications for. And so what we can establish from the record is that this is a con man, and he is a liar, and he is a felon that is, he's on the addiction spectrum.
Yeah.
He's definitely drug seeking, looking for things that he can either, I can assume, sell or trade or use himself. And by the accounts of this man and what he is into and the fact that he enjoys using and in stupefying himself, it could be assumed that he did it for his own consumption. But it's also possible, since he was a drug trafficker, that he could have been amassing drugs in jail to sell them, because this is something he's used to doing. Now, don't take my word for it. His own relatives will tell you what kind of a person Eddie Black Cloud is. And the fact that he is related to the Archambolds.
Okay.
He's related to Dapple Dave.
Yep.
He's related to the people in the leadership. That is why we can assume no one did anything to remove this dangerous, felonious predator from amongst the ranks of those at the camp.
Mm-hmm.
Or later on when they went on to form camps elsewhere. Or from putting him front and center in stories about the Dakota Access Pipeline and the divest movement. Remember the bank divestment movement that happened afterwards?
Yep.
That went all over the country. He was prominently featured in a lot of stories about these movements. Why did they let a drug felon be involved in all of that? Maybe because he's related to the chairman's family and they did not want him to feel left out. Or they couldn't stop him for whatever reason. But they did. They allowed this to go on. Some people in his family were brave enough to call him out, such as Josephine Archambault. And this is what Josephine Archambault had to say about her relative. Okay? She said, I am a close blood relative to Eddie Blackcloud Sr. I'm his aunt. I will never deny that. I still have love in my heart because I acknowledge our connection. I hate what he is doing. It's flat wrong. I am a proud, strong, fearless water protector. I would give my life for a future for our descendants. Miniwachoni to the bone. Bloodline is always there, but the evilness that he is showing, he has some traits, not some, identical to a member of his close circle who was a pedophile. I hid in closets anywhere that he couldn't find me. I escaped him, but others didn't. I saw him spray lighter fluid on a cat and set it on fire.
Oh, my God.
He laughed while it screamed. He spent most of his life in prison. He's a self-proclaimed medicine man, performing ceremonies on women. His sisters, with little girls, moved far away. There's more. A lot more. But you should get a good picture of him. Eddie grew up around him. And if you go to the next one, there's a lot more. Let's see. There's more, a lot more, but you should get a good picture of him. Eddie grew up around him and displays the same way of treating women. It pains my heart to bring this into the light of day, but those young, dumb, inexperienced girls that he is using are in danger of him at any point that they try to get away. I speak up to open people's eyes to what he is capable of. I have no fear of him or anyone. I stand up for myself, and I'm damn good at it. I say, bring it on. Threaten me? You better be able to back it up. I know he's heard my vocal condemnations of him. Go to the next one. It's out of love for the Navajo relatives who fight for life or death of their nations. Their poisoned water is not accepted. They're standing up. Miniwachoni. I am so deeply ashamed of Eddie's actions. I will scream in his face, go home. You are shaming our family, our res. He ranks right up there in popularity with Dapple Dave. Eddie, go home.
Wow.
So.
Jeez. Pretty scathing from a relative.
Animal abuser.
Yeah.
Pedophilia, traits of pedophilia. And after posting these condemnations in public, people in his family were threatened.
Oh.
Yes. Josephine Archambault posted about the death threats that she received.
Wow.
And from Seattle, Washington, she posted, I got an email telling me to stay out of Eddie Black Cloud Sr.'s business, or something could happen to me. I sent a reply, don't know if it will go through, so I'm sharing it here. So I know that he'll get it.
Wow.
Eddie Black Cloud Sr. You don't know me well if you think you scare me. And you and your hordes of misguided young girls scare the hell out of me. You should be afraid more. How long do you think these girls' fathers, brothers, uncles are going to let you use their young female family members like Charles Manson used the women he used to steal for him and eventually to kill for him? You are using them in the same way. What scares me is the harm you are doing to them. But the bigger picture is you're hurting water protectors, real water protectors. So not only does this person who is a relative, a blood relative, an aunt, telling you that he is a dangerous predator, he abuses women in the style of Charles Manson?
Wow.
That's pretty scary. And yet, he was allowed to run around and still is running around free. The threat has not been contained. And that is shameful. Not only for those who are water protectors from Standing Rock, because you cannot call yourself a protector of the sacred, a protector of women, a protector of water, when you couldn't protect the people that were in the movement from a predator you guys helped to put in place and never called out. Here is another relative of his. This is Hokaludawin Thundershield. Here's more backstory to what Eddie Black Cloud is like from his own relatives. So far, I've shown you his own words from a letter to the editor, his lawsuit, the results of that lawsuit, and now I'm going to show you what his own relatives are saying about him.
Exactly.
Okay? Hokaludawin says, let's talk about Eddie. Eddie used to try and play nasty with his little cousins. You know what that means?
Yeah.
Play nasty?
Abuse.
Abuse, yes. Because you saw that other woman, Josephine, talking about how
She had to hide.
they had to hide from him.
Yep.
Right. Hokaludawin says Eddie used to play like that with his little cousins, with children. She then says, ladies, one day back when I lived in my mother's home, until my family came back, I was house sitting. Eddie and my uncle and his old lady came over to my mama's house. Eddie's a tattoo artist. So, Hokaludawin asked him if she could get a tattoo from him.
Oh.
And that's when Eddie and her were still okay with each other.
I see.
He said yes, he's going to give her the tattoo. So Hokaludawin says, so I sat down and he got his stuff ready and he started to put on the tattoo on my right shoulder. I wanted a Black Panther, but he went with a hummingbird.
Oh, really?
You remember that, Eddie Black Cloud? You remember that? He took a break and he slapped me in my shoulder on the tattoo, thinking it would hurt me. But it didn't.
Wow.
He's ornery.
Yeah.
You know, he wants to be hurtful. Mm-hmm. And Hokulita Win, remembering what happened, says Eddie Black Cloud then took a shot of his alcohol. And I thought he was going to finish, and instead, this sick SOB acted like he was gonna tattoo my arm. But instead, he licked her face
Whoa.
from her mouth all the way to her ear.
Gross.
And when he did that, the uncle that was visiting came around the corner and caught Eddie, saw him do it,
Mm-hmm.
and hollered at him.
Wow.
Our uncle grabbed a hammer and chased Eddie out of the house,
Wow.
down the street. Remember Eddie Black Cloud? We're first cousins. Our mothers are sisters. That's the
Wow.
nastiness.
I guess.
And later that week, there's more, honey.
Mm-hmm.
Later that week, Eddie stole a truck from Gomez-Schempp. She didn't. Hokuludawin is naming names
Yep.
from the past, so everybody knows. She's putting this message out there as much for the ladies as she is for Eddie himself.
Yep, exactly.
She calling. Remember Eddie? Remember when you did this?
Exactly.
She says later that week, Eddie stole a truck from Gomez-Schempp.
Yeah.
And Gomez-Schempp's daughter was still inside the truck when Eddie stole it.
Really?
Yeah. So, the cops and Cody all chased him. They finally stopped him in the truck, and they beat his ass.
Wow.
Colby did too. He jumped in with the cops, and they beat him up. And then, it says, Hokuludawin says, Eddie, let's talk about when you broke into my house.
Oh, no.
And you stole my kids' toys, my VCR, my kids' movies, their PlayStation, and all the games that went with it.
Wow.
The total amount came up to over $700.
Jeez.
He stole their whole entertainment
Exactly.
for the children. His nieces and nephews he stole from. His own family he steals from. His own family he abuses. His own family he is violent and hurtful toward. And Hokuludawin remembers what happened to him. People called me, she said, and told me, hey, Josie, your cousin tried to sell us your PlayStation.
Oh, boy.
And your games for your kids. And the names, your family's names are all over them. She wrote her name on her games.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Hokuludawin said, my kid's dad and his friends, they went out on a hunt. And they caught Eddie in an alley behind the barber shop. And they beat his ass.
Wow.
You remember that, Eddie? How my cousins on my father's side effed you up. Travis, James, William, and John. Remember when Travis, James, William, and John beat the living piss out of you, Eddie? Remember that? Because Hokuludawin does.
Mm-hmm.
Fondly. Apparently, she's like,
Yeah.
remember that, Eddie?
Yeah.
You remember. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
But he didn't keep his nasty behavior in the family. It extended to defrauding people out in the world. In the UK, in the Netherlands. He was an international fraud.
Wow.
He was taking money from people all over the country and all around the globe. This is just a sample from one of the people he took money from, a guy named Phil Richards. And all of these communications were made to a woman whose testimony I will play on a future show about what he did to her.
Okay.
By the name of Jess Wagers. And this is a communication she had with him about Eddie Black Cloud stealing money. So Phil says, I need to know more about Eddie Black Cloud. I've been helping him out with money for weeks. I'm very disappointed to find out that he's a fraud. Anything between us will be confidential. I am blocking him. And this is from May of 2018.
Yep.
And Jess says, what would you like to know? I've been his administrator for over 2 years, and he took it upon himself to act like a child, and he stole from me and accused my husband of theft and some other very disturbing things, disgusting things. I have proof that he didn't spend a dime on those horses. So this man was, Eddie Blackcloud was requesting money and having GoFundMes out there for Mustangs, wild Mustangs that he was supposedly caring for.
Wow.
That was on a horse sanctuary somewhere in Arizona that he was supposedly supporting. Not run by him, but definitely supported by him, that he was going to be taking care of the horses. He did not, and the money for the horses was not given to the horses. Several of those horses ended up dying.
Oh, boy.
We've heard the story of horses being left to die, to starve. This is something that is not unusual to the stories we heard coming out of Standing Rock. If you will recall, the fake shaman supported by Honor the Earth's Winona LaDuke, the daughter of Vincent LaDuke, or Sun Bear, another fake shaman that was supported by the people in the leadership of Standing Rock. He, too, was convicted of starving horses from Standing Rock.
I remember that.
These people abuse humans and animals alike. And they are deadly. These people are not afraid to threaten people's lives. It rolls off the tongue like any other thing that one might say. Listen for yourselves how Eddie Blackcloud spoke to people he felt were bothering him by stalking him or following too closely and reporting on his fraudulent and damaging behaviors. Here he is, making threats.
Sucker fish water protectors, sucker fish wannabe me's. I'm going to Brussels. From there, I'm going to New Zealand. Shit, I might as well make a world tour. While you're still sitting back on a reservation trying to live off of me. With your little drama, your mouth, all this and that. All you want to be a kitchtas attacking my sisters and Sisters United. Men don't attack women. And you are a warrior, right? I don't think so. I don't think so. You little brothers and sisters got to get a life, not my life. Don't be followers. Don't follow people. Be a leader. Make your own thunder. Don't live off of my farts. Yeah? You can't have that thunder. Yeah? So anyways, I'm over at my sister Jess's house. I just got into town today. I guess, from what I hear, latest rumor, I got beat up in a casino, this and that. Whoop-doo, whoop-doo, whoop-doo. That's all I gotta say. You know? That's what I gotta say. To my brothers and sisters, to my real brothers and sisters out there, you want to come see me? Come to Twitter. I'm raising the same hell. All you stalkers, prairie dogs, trolls, whatever, you want to run your mouth, bring it to Twitter so my attorney can get your ass. Yeah. And for you people who think I'm scared of you, you got another thing coming because you don't know who I know. I know people that'll put you in your grave. Believe that. Believe that. So let's see who's watching.
Who are those people that can put people in their graves? Is he talking about AIM? Because he does have a lot of strong affiliations with the people in AIM.
Wow.
And, of course, in the leadership of Standing Rock, like the Archambault family, which he is part of.
Yep.
He is related to. And, of course, I told you that they prominently featured this man. He didn't go to Brussels.
Okay.
I just wanted to let you know that didn't actually happen. Once they realized that he was a convicted drug felon, they were like, maybe not.
Yeah.
And he was not invited. And you know what? He's worn out his welcome in a lot of places. You notice he was talking from his sister Jess's house? That's the same Jess that we saw in the text messages. That is the same woman who has been providing me information for this program. And it is the same person's testimony that you're going to be hearing in an upcoming show about how she was assaulted by this man.
Okay.
He has worn out his welcome. He has used and abused so many people. He's no longer on Facebook. He's raising hell on Twitter, but those doors are closing around him as well because he is exposed as the abusive, predatory human that he is.
Yep.
And it is thanks to the victims. It is no thanks to the leadership, the PR people at Standing Rock, the people from Hollywood, and the people in AIM and in the leadership of Last Real Indians like Chase Iron Eyes. It is no thanks to them. They refused to help with the Kathleen Bennett case,
That's right.
and they let predators like Eddie Black Cloud prance around like nothing.
Yep.
Here he is in the story of the Democratic Party of New Mexico divesting from Wells Fargo over the Dakota Access Pipeline. And guess where this story featuring Eddie Black Cloud was put? Well, none other than Last Real Indian Inspire. You can see that here, the same headline from Last Real Indians Inspire. And of course, we know who runs the Last Real Indians because we helped them in their endeavors and on their Last Real Indians website. And that's none other than Chase Iron Eyes. And I told you at the very beginning of my reporting on Standing Rock that Chase Iron Eyes and his Last Real Indians, which we were a fiscal agent for, had been raising money with Sean King and raised over $2.2 million, but they did not raise that money. They raised that money separate from the umbrella of the nonprofit that we run, so that they would not be accountable for the money that they raised, which is not illegal per se, but it definitely did not seem like something ethical or transparent or something that someone that wanted to be seen as trustworthy would do.
Exactly.
Therefore, I exposed the fact that Chase and Sean King were raising the money that they were under a generosity fund, kind of like a GoFundMe online thing that they raised that $2.2 million. I also cut ties with Last Real Indians with Chase Iron Eyes himself at that point. He basically stopped responding to us because we wanted to publish the story about what happened to Kathleen Bennett and what Mulaney Stoneman, one of his associates that he'd been working with for a long time, had done in the Kathleen Bennett case. And of course, we went on to see Chase Iron Eyes not just promoting and working with a bunch of these very shady people, but also giving interviews on Russian television like all the other people. Here he is doing one of many interviews that he did on Russian television news. This one about EPA ban energy transfer partners from drilling in Ohio. But that's not all that he did. This is the same Chase Iron Eyes that promoted the orchestrated confrontation between Nathan Phillips, Raymond Kingfisher, and the Catholic school kids at the Indigenous Peoples March in Washington, D.C. that resulted in lawsuits against mainstream media that the Catholic school's parents won because it was a hoax. It was a hate crime type style hoax, very similar to the one that was perpetrated by Jussie Smollett. Except this one was perpetrated by Nathan Phillips, Raymond Kingfisher, and a bunch of other folks that were in that circle and promoted and supported and propagated by none other than Chase Iron Eyes himself. Here he is telling their version of what happened at the D.C. Indigenous Peoples March.
Okay.
Because the Indigenous Peoples March had ended, everybody had gone away. The crowd had dissipated. There was only like 5, 6 natives there who were closing it out with their own ceremonial protocol, and these, what seems like 50, 60, 70 young people, just this angry, like a bunch of frat boys is what it reminded me of. Like they were drunk at a football game or something. They were all like doing these chants. It sounded like, I don't know, like a sports chant or something. They were saying different things, and I can't even make it out on the video what they're saying, but they were harassing people. That throng of young MAGA supporters came down the stairs and surrounded Nathan and the 4 or 5 people that were with him, and that's where you see the video pick up. I mean, I immediately I got very concerned and afraid that violence or some sort of physical confrontation was going to break out, because they were just so aggressive, so loud, and they just kept jumping up and down and chanting and hollering. It was like it was a mob, like an angry mob behavior. The way that it happened, I think, is a blessing, because Nathan is an elder, Raymond is an elder, and they held their ground without returning any aggression or any of that energy that was being directed at them. They kind of absorbed it and redirected it, and came out on top in a good way. As you can see, their whole story is going around the country very quickly.
Right. And if you'll recall, you might recall that right after this story became national and even international, of the confrontation of Nathan Phillips with these kids, I immediately exposed who Nathan Phillips was, what Chase Iron Eyes and a bunch of the people that were promoting this on social media, what they were part of, and how they're connected to Raymond Kingfisher and Nathan Phillips and the Kathleen Bennett story. In addition to the fact that Ann Redford Hall, an attorney that had been contacting me throughout the whole Standing Rock, period of my reporting, and who had been trying to, I don't know, ply me with the idea that she was going to do a documentary about the work that I was doing, all to remain, I think, close to me in an effort to try to manipulate my reporting in some way. She contacted me immediately after I did my first report on the connections between Nathan Phillips and Standing Rock, and tried to persuade me that those kids,
that's right.
Those kids, they were bad. Regardless of how things looked to me, those kids were monsters. Why, they almost knocked her down when she was trying to go into the hotel.
That's right.
She was staying at the same hotel as those kids the night before. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
It's almost like the group of people that planned that confrontation, because it was very much planned, targeted a group of Catholic school students that were going to the Right to Life March, whatever their annual Right to Life March that they have there in Washington, D.C., which coincided with the Indigenous Peoples March.
Mm-hmm.
And that they stayed at the same hotel as Anne Redford Hall, one of the attorneys that was working closely with Dennis Banks and JoJo, Dennis Banks's assistant, which she told me were with her in Washington, D.C., and had dinner with her at the same place where these kids were staying. You got to find that recording so we can play that for folks, because I got the receipts.
Yep,
because
exactly.
you know that I have the receipts. So all of these people were working with and using this indigenous leaders, these shaman, these religious and spiritual leaders like Dennis Banks, and they were using them in the movement for photo ops, for these things that they were doing. Remember that Chase Iron Eyes was the same person that got people arrested at the last child camp.
Exactly.
A whole bunch of people got arrested because of him. And do not forget his close association to Evan K. Duke, the self-labeled Antifa leader that was smuggling people down in Mexico along with Myron Dewey, that was accused of being investigated by our government for trying to smuggle weapons and humans over the border. Let's not forget that when they were at camp, Chase Iron Eyes was rubbing elbows with Carlos Marroquin, who later was working on Bernie Sanders' campaign, and Evan Duke, and serial rapist Red Wolf Pope. Here they all are at camp. Carlos Marroquin, the veterans, Red Wolf Pope right there in the front, and Evan Duke. And of course, Red Wolf Pope, that guy that's right there.
Yeah.
Wes Clark Jr. did a long Twitter thread about how he thought Red Wolf Pope was his medicine man.
Oh, that's right.
That was his medicine man. Okay? So, I just want to keep people, well aware of what the connections are between these folks and what happened at Standing Rock, because they've been collaborating, working with each other, going all the way back to then. Chase Iron Eyes also promoted the Jussie Smollett hoax.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that. Here he is talking about how the MAGA machine is starting its spin. They're trying to spin the story about how Jussie Smollett was refusing to collaborate with the detectives in Chicago. And they're already trying to spin the story against poor Jussie, who we now know invented the whole thing.
Yep, exactly.
Made it all up. Yeah. That's the same guy who supported Jussie Smollett's hate crime hoax. The hoax that he perpetrated with Nathan Phillips at the D.C. Indigenous Peoples March. And that's not all. These folks that support fake shaman, that support predatory medicine men, fake medicine men that abuse women and children and animals, they also sell ceremony. This is all of their Indianness and their spirituality is up for sale. Ka-ching! Just like, and that's exactly what fake spiritual leaders from Standing Rock went to do, along with Chase Iron Eyes at Burning Man, right after they closed the camps.
Yep.
Then next year in 2017. And here's a great, funny video roasting Chase Iron Eyes and one of his companions at Standing Rock for normalizing that everyone is indigenous. White people who desperately want to be Indians. Chase Iron Eyes says, you already are one, so go ahead and and wear your feathers and be an Indian, because we can all be indigenous. And you know how we're all connected? The drum. And they show us how we transcend. This is what they were doing at a place where people are having drug-fueled orgies and are spending most of their time naked on drugs. That's where he went to sell his ceremony and these ridiculous ideas. Listen to this video.
My name is Andrew Ecker. My mother, Kathy Lindsay. My father, Dale Ecker. My mother's mother, Elva Gallegos. My father's mother, Evelyn Beatty, Irish woman. My mother's father, Leroy Lindsay, Apache man. My father's father, Wayne Ecker, Algonquin.
Today, Junior! And Chase is Standing Rock lawyer, attorney. So it's a pleasure to meet you and an honor. Rainbow Tribe did a little bit of fundraising to send over to you guys.
We are all indigenous, so we need to transcend. And one way to do that is through the drum.
That's Chase at Burning Man, transcending amongst the drugged out. There he is. Embarrassing. How embarrassing that he took his regalia and they took embers from the sacred fire, supposedly, to Burning Man.
Wow.
What an embarrassment he is. But that didn't stop him, Chase Iron Eyes, from associating with a whole host of people, including Dan Sheehan, or whatever the name of that white-haired lawyer or dude, film videographer that's part of the Lakota Law Project. Chase is touted to be a lawyer, but he is not registered as a lawyer around here that we know of. Chase hasn't represented anyone, and his Lakota Law Project didn't represent or help anybody. They did raise millions of dollars, but who knows what the hell they did with them. But what I can tell you is that they need to get their own house in order before they continue to go out into the world and mess with other people's lives or put themselves in the leadership of anything. Because they do it very poorly. They platform people who are predators, and they themselves are abusers, liars. They themselves are harming their own family members. Now, Sarah Jumping Eagle, you may recall, was one of the first people that was arrested at Standing Rock, along with Dana Yellowfat, who I hear is also related to Eddie Blackcloud, along with the Archambault family.
Wow.
And Sarah Jumping Eagle, who is married to Chase Iron Eyes, was very upset during the Standing Rock closing of camps, not because her husband Chase got arrested at the last child camp, along with other people that he got arrested that day, but because he was having an affair. Another affair. If you recall, at the beginning of Standing Rock, Chase was running for Congress.
That's right.
And it was already common knowledge that he had been having an affair with Ruth Hopkins, who was also one of the people that was one of the main editors on Last Real Indians for a very long time. And she not only published the details of their affair, she also published nude photos of him all over his own website. Not fazed by any of that, Sarah Jumping Eagle stayed at his side. And later on, when he was cheating on her again, with one of the videographers that he was caught with at the last child camp. She posted that she was single, had left him, and that he was a psychopath or sociopath.
Yep.
I can't remember which one it was. I'm going to have to try to find that post. But she was angry.
Yep.
And then they resolved it, I guess. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was getting to travel all over the country, all over the world, as they were doing from place to place. Because remember, there was all these celebrities at Standing Rock. Francis Fisher, Jane Fonda. There was musicians. There was concerts. There was museum. There was speaking engagements.
Yep.
There were protests.
Yep.
There were other camps. There were other things that were going on in Europe. And it just so happens that one of the many celebrities that went to Standing Rock, Ezra Miller, the actor that portrays the Flash and that will be having a movie coming out very soon in the installment of the Flash series, he was accused of grooming the oldest child of Sarah Jumping Eagle and Chase Iron Eyes.
Yeah.
And making her gay and making her trans.
Yeah.
I guess the allegation intuits. I mean, they don't come out and say that. Let's just hear from Sarah herself. What did she say? Here are some of the posts that she put out about Ezra Miller being a predator. She wrote, the information, and this is from June of 2022.
Okay, not that long ago.
No. The information I am sharing should make you feel uncomfortable. You can't look away. You can't ignore it. I hope you never feel comfortable with a vulnerable person being abused and drugged by a psychopath. A picture is worth 1,000 words. You aren't in my situation, and I hope that you never are. I will do whatever it takes to help get my child to safety. If you don't want to share the photo, then don't. Share the psychopath Ezra Miller is a predator photos and put pressure on Warner Brothers. I think it is. Ezra Miller. Yep. Warner Brothers Discovery. Ezra Miller is a predator, she posted on August of 2022. They are delusional, entitled, abusive, and a psychopath. The victims' criminal behavior and charges will keep coming forward. Warner Brothers Discovery needs to get a clue. I am surprised that Chase and Sarah didn't need to get a lawyer because that is defamation.
Yeah.
And from what I have learned online in the resolution of what happened to their oldest child, who is transgender and goes now by the name of Gibson, they were flat out lying about Ezra Miller. And the reason behind it is pretty disgusting.
Wow.
Yeah, it's going to get ugly. So on this, the second day of Trans Visibility week or month, I want for you to see what they did to their own trans child.
Wow.
After she was an adult, because they did not want her to transition and they wanted to force her to stop being gay and trans. Somebody by the name of Ghosto Meg, tweeted about this in response to someone that believed the assertions by Chase and his wife regarding Ezra Miller. Wait for what? The court case involving Gibson Iron Eyes took place in July. Their parents failed to force them into a permanent conservatorship. They were trying to take away their rights to autonomy, Duke.
Wow.
A conservatorship is like a guardianship where you don't have the right to make your own medical decisions or your own decisions about anything.
Yeah.
Financial decisions, educational decisions, nothing. This is what they did to Britney Spears, right?
Yep, exactly.
They were trying to do the same thing to their own child, who is an adult, by saying that they were vulnerable, that they were mentally ill, that they were drugged, that they were groomed, and that they were abused by a Hollywood actor. When in fact, that Hollywood actor, who is themselves a non-binary individual that was trying to help this child escape the abusive, transphobic, and homophobic family and movement, frankly, that these people were part of. I want to show you that the people that went on to join the caravans and help smuggle people into the United States to seek asylum are the same people that are vaccination, anti-mask, that are homophobic, and that are transphobic. These are the same people that supported the Jussie Smollett hoax. The same people.
Wow.
Let me show you the different screenshots that are in that tweet.
Okay.
Here is the court paper, the court docket that shows that's Gibson's dead name, but you can see Gibson had a case based upon the petition filed by Chase Iron Eyes for guardianship of the respondent, which is Gibson. That was scheduled for June 27th of 2022 in the tribal court building. And they took out some of their identifying information there.
Yeah.
But there you see the court case went to court, scheduled for court, and based upon the guardianship request of the parent, Chase Iron Eyes. The second, you can go to the second one here. The second one, the second image is from Gibson's Instagram account. And in this excerpt, it says, Gibson said, "I am in no way or under any circumstance have ever been, during my short-lived adulthood, in need of a conservatorship.
Okay.
My father and his allegations hold no weight and are frankly transphobic and based in the notion that I am somehow incapable of coherent thought or opposing opinions to those of my own kindred, worrying about my well-being. I am now aware of the severity of emotional and psychological manipulation that I was made to endure while in my parents' home." Severe.
Yeah.
Emotional and psychological manipulation, transphobic, homophobic. Now let's go to the next one. This is another post from the Instagram of Gibson. "I am an adult and I deserve to feel authority in my own body. I am tired of wondering whether or not cops will show up to section me on a daily basis. I have decided upon a therapist, and I am excited to now engage in conversation with a mental health professional about my anxiety and probable depression. It is no one's business. My choices are my own, and as to the nature of police intervention in my case, it is unnecessary, and it is a waste of time and resources." As you saw, the mom, Juanita,
Yeah.
Sarah Juanita Jumping Eagle said, charges are coming, charges are forthcoming, you're going to see all of this happening. And instead, their case was completely dismissed.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And here's the history. It says in June, two restraining orders, really protective orders, were issued against Ezra Miller. The first was filed in tribal court in North Dakota by Chase Iron Eyes, a Native American businessman. Notice they don't refer to him as an attorney.
Yeah.
Because why wouldn't an attorney be able to represent himself?
Yeah. Plus it credentialize you too.
Right. And his wife, Sarah Jumping Eagle, on behalf of their adult 18-year-old
Yeah.
Gibson Iron Eyes. They use the dead name there, but they did do reference that goes by Gibson. They accused Miller of grooming, brainwashing, and emotionally abusing their child, a non-binary indigenous activist. Miller met when Gibson was only 12. Mm-hmm. The tribal court put a temporary order in place, but ultimately dismissed the request for a permanent one.
Okay.
So the restraining order or the protection order that was originally filed that would require Ezra Miller to stay away from Gibson was granted. And as I've told you about restraining orders or protection orders, the first one, which is usually temporary, is most of the time granted. But then a court date is set for you to come and provide evidence and proof of the fact that there is a real threat that needs to be ongoing and protected. Mm-hmm. And they did not meet the standard. So it was dismissed. It says that the parents say that they withdrew their request for custody because the odds were stacked against them.
Yeah.
But in this post from Gibson, talking about the abuse that they endured at the hands of their father, you can see that there are other factors at play. This is another post by Gibson. There are countless missing and murdered indigenous people. I am not one of them.
Wow.
Hashtag missing and murdered indigenous women, girls to T2S. That is real, and it's on an ongoing crisis, and therefore I wish to recognize the severity of misinformation about my life and experience. As an indigenous feminist, political advocate for Native youth, and queer person, I have come to understand the fact that specifically it is those perspectives and narratives that are buried. An intentional degradation of our movement occurred on my behalf. They used the indigenous people's movement and the movement to protect missing and murdered indigenous women for this child that is non-binary, transgender, queer, and does not want for them to be searching under that missing, murdered indigenous women tag. The people holding positions of power and influence in our organizational spaces need to be checked and held accountable. Colonial institutions do not work for Native nations. The upkeep of patriarchal egotism in Indian country must be addressed. Wow. I agree with Gibson. Mm-hmm. The call for accountability is coming from within.
Yep.
Here's another post. This one is an excerpt from Rolling Stone magazine where Gibson was interviewed, in which they said in an email that Gibson denied allegations that they were being controlled by Ezra Miller, the Flash actor. Quote, "The notion that I have been brainwashed or that I have been coerced in any context is grotesquely false, Gibson wrote. My independence from my family is in this way is new and complex. Their reaction to my actions is not my responsibility. And I've tried to have civil virtual interactions with both of them and failed." This person, Gibson, was stalked by their parents all over the country. Mm-hmm. And the parents even posted that Gibson or Ezra or somebody with the group physically assaulted the mom. Posted pictures of bruised arms and talked about the fact that they were being abused. Ongoing abuse of their child was happening. And it turns out from this article that we can see, Gibson is saying the opposite is true. They tried to work things out with their parents. The parents would not, they wouldn't cooperate. The quote goes on, quote, "For media outlets and the public to believe and sensationalize my parents' claims is a gruesome violation of my dignity and Ezra's," Gibson wrote, before thanking those who are making efforts to support and not undermine their autonomy. Lawyers for Ezra Miller didn't reply to requests for comment. So, what else did the parents do besides be homophobic and transphobic and stalk them and post sensationalized, grotesque, as Gibson calls them, mischaracterizations, and use the organizations within the movement to seek out missing and murdered Indigenous women to try to force Gibson into a conservatorship? Well, apparently, according to this message sent from, I believe that's Chase Iron Eyes.
Okay.
It's one of the parents
Yep.
to Gibson, telling them they need to continue with their ceremonies. And it says, I'm sorry to say that you, this is referring to Gibson, you have Lakota blood, and it is going to compel certain inspirations that only other Lakota can really help you with. It's okay to consider the depths of other worldviews, but there are blood obligations that cannot be avoided except to your detriment and spiritual degradation. You'll see that we are here to help you. Wow. Do not play with medicine.
Wow.
And then you see that this is posted on Gibson's Instagram, and you can see their comment below. At the bottom here it says, from Gibson, this is the way my parents have threatened me. In attempts to manipulate my movements and assert their narrative to the public, using ceremony and native religious teachings to guilt me into returning to their dysfunctional household. This is not what our medicine is for. Ezra is innocent.
Wow.
Statement from Gibson.
Mm-hmm.
And Gibson was exposed to sweat ceremonies that were abusive. This was, people following the Instagram and the social media of Gibson talked about the fact that Gibson reported being abused in more than one way. It's Giving Silvo tweeted on October 23rd of 22, Gibson has told us over and over that their parents are the abusers, and that Ezra, a platonic queer friend, non-binary, they go by they, them pronouns now, helped them to escape. The Iron Eyes wanted conversion therapy, and they put Gibson through a full month of sweat ceremonies, even cutting off Gibson's hair and burning it.
Wow. Jeez.
That is what these people subjected their own child to. And by the way, remember, they went back to 2016 when Standing Rock happened, when Gibson was only 12 years old, to say that Ezra Miller had been grooming their child for years. But the person, one of the people that had made accusations against Ezra Miller, an ex groupie of Ezra Miller's, broke their silence to post about Chase Iron Eyes, knowing full well, that Chase knew Ezra Miller was not a groomer, but used the accusations that this ex-fan had made to their own benefit because it was expedient.
Yeah.
They posted, Chase knew my groomer claims were untrue when I talked about Ezra Miller in 2020. If he felt they were, he would not have continued his friendship with Ezra Miller until up to 2022.
Oh, yeah.
So Chase Iron Eyes continued to remain friends and avail himself of opportunities to travel, and so did Gibson, to the set of different movies in different countries, and hang out with the Hollywood folks. Chase Iron Eyes did too. And it goes on, it says, he is out of options on how to get Gibson back. So he is using that lie as a tactic.
Wow.
It will not work.
Hmm.
And no, it did not work.
Yeah.
It did not work. What they did was to alienate their own child, their oldest child. And that is a great loss because this is a child that they had trained in activism, in leadership. This is the child they had deliver letters to Hillary Clinton in Washington, D.C. This is a child that they had in the leadership of the children that were in the Indigenous Youth Council that was supported and promoted by Chase Iron Eyes and Francis Fisher.
Yeah.
And of course, Francis Fisher always promoted Chase Iron Eyes and Dennis Banks. Here's one of her posts from 2017 promoting the Last Real Indians publication that Eddie Blackcloud was prominently featured in.
Oh, that's right.
Along with Dennis Banks and Ames, who's Ames' co-founder, live from Oceti.
Okay.
But I also want to show you that Francis Fisher traveled around with Dennis Banks. Dennis Banks' assistant, JoJo, and the lawyer that contacted me, Ann Redford Hall, weren't just in Washington, D.C., conveniently when that Nathan Phillips hoax happened. They were always around the people in spiritual leadership like Dennis Banks. And here is a video from her Facebook page where they're at Capitol Records with Dennis Banks to record a song called Minnie Wachoni, which they were going to use to raise money for the Defense Fund for the Water Protector Legal Collective.
Oh, my God.
Here you go.
We're at Capitol Records recording with a whole slew of amazing recording artists and Robbie Romero. And that's Don Was, the famous Don Was. Dennis Banks is upstairs.
Yeah, Dennis Banks is upstairs. And Robert Romero and Bob Was, the famous Bob Was, whom I've never heard of. I don't know why he's famous. But the same guy that you saw in that video with the weird hat is the same guy at Standing Rock with Dennis Banks and Chase Iron Eyes in that photo.
Yeah.
And here's a video from her page when Dennis Banks joins the group of recording artists at Capitol Records and her to record the song Minnie Wachoni. Here's that video clip where you can see Dennis Banks. That's the Waz guy, Bob Waz.
This is awesome. It's a great vocal.
Really?
Absolutely killer. I love it, man.
It sounded horrible to me.
Yes. Those are the people that were, hanging out with these people in the leadership, like Chase Iron Eyes and Dennis Banks and all of these folks that were promoted by the Hollywood crowd and the PR crowd that went to Standing Rock. They have very questionable backgrounds. Chase Iron Eyes is also a convicted felon. Remember, he has a weapons charge.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
And, of course, he got arrested at Standing Rock. And, of course, we know that the people surrounding Eddie Blackcloud, like the drug dealer, Vanessa Dundon.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Also convicted felon. Eddie Blackcloud, convicted felon. Do you see the pattern
Yeah,
arising?
I see the pattern, yep.
And these are people that are supposed to be shaman
Yeah.
and healers, right? Keep it here on 88.1 FM, KPPPLP Fargo Moorhead, where we are adding local color to your airwaves. I will be bringing you more about the connections between the shaman, the healers, and this movement that is pseudo-religious, super culty, definitely homophobic, transphobic, and adjacent to white supremacy, adjacent to the people that committed a coup on January 6th.
Yeah.
And the connections between that and QAnon. All of that will be coming out of the American Psyop series focused on nutbag Wes Clark Jr. and the series podcast that was done by produced by the Midas Touch, along with a whole host of people over at the Bunker Crew, including journalist Emily Bicks, Jack Bryan, Stacey Sher, Marley Clements, Grant DeSimone, and Brent Meiselas over at the Midas Touch. We will be bringing you much more about the connections and all of the crazy things that Wes Clark lied about clearly in his podcast series, American Psyop, so that you can find out the real deal.
Exactly.
So, join us again. Your hosts, Cindy Gomez-Schempp
and Duke Gomez-Schempp.
Good night, and God bless.
Mm-hmm.